G'day, it's Mark and welcome back to the channel. And in this episode in our Fairlane Auto History series, we look at my favourite model of all time, the ZH. The ZH Fairlane was produced from May 1976 to May 1979. From a styling perspective, the ZH Fairlane took on a more American appearance. There had been some criticism that the ZF Fairlane and the ZG Fairlane looked too much like the derivative Ford Falcon. If you look at the styling of a Mercury Park Lane from around 1967-68, you can see quite a similarity to the front grille of the ZH Fairlane. The Fairlane also featured quite attractive rear fins on the rear of the vehicle with square tail lights. It had a very American appearance. I remember when I first saw a ZH Fairlane, it must have been, I don't know if it was a prototype, but I think it was late 75 or very early 76. I feel it was before the car was released. I was walking home from school and I saw one parked. I thought, wow, there's an American car. I actually didn't realise that it was an Australian vehicle. I particularly like the heavy chrome bumpers, and these are also featured on the Falcon, of course. The car had a very blocky style, as I mentioned, with fins front and rear, really, because the front bonnet had a very powerful power dome design above the grille, and then upswept fenders on each end. So it had quite a nice design to it. Ford dropped the base custom model, and now all ZH Fairlanes were only available with a standard 4.9 litre, 302 cubic inch V8. Four-wheel disc brakes were also standard, as was air conditioning. There was the availability of an optional 5.8 351 V8 engine. The ZH Fairlane was distinctly different from the base Falcon. Ford had seen its market share in the luxury car segment go from 50.3% in 1972 to just over 27%. And there were a number of reasons for this. The derivative styling, as I mentioned, from the ZF and ZG models. The increased competition from Holden Statesman and Caprice were also a factor. And there was also an increase in the sales of European cars. So the model lineup now consisted of the Fairlane 500 and a more luxurious version, which was known as the Marquis. The Marquis nameplate had been taken from the American Mercury Marquis that was released in the very late 60s. Both the 4.9 litre and the 5.8 litre featured 4-barrel carburetor. There was also a foot-operated parking brake, which was quite American. Generally, parking brakes on Australian cars tend to be more of a umbrella style or lever style, but the foot-operated brake was seen as a luxury feature and had featured on the P5 LTD as well. Steel-belted radial tyres and limited slip differential were also standard. The Marquis added power windows and new lounge front seats, which were taken from the American Ford Thunderbird with centre armrests. There was also a redesigned instrument panel, and this was made of plastic for the first time. The new instrument panel featured a horizontal speedometer, as opposed to the Falcons, which featured the round gauges. In May 1978, there was an upgrade to the styling of the vehicle. The cars saw changes to the carburetors, so they had improved fuel consumption. And the Marquis also added leather interior with 6-way power adjustment to the front seats. There was also a revised handling suspension, and this reflected the updates that had been made to the Falcon. Visually, the Fairlane front grille was moved from a silver finish to a chrome and black finish, and the Ford logo was now in the centre grille. Ford Australia was one of the first divisions globally to adopt the Ford roundel on the vehicles instead of the FORD in letter form. This was soon taken up by many other divisions around the world, but Ford Australia was one of the first to use this. As I mentioned, the 6-cylinder engines were dropped, so the 4.9 litre 302 cubic inch V8 was standard. This put out 151 kilowatts at 4,500 revs, or 364 newton meters at 2,200 revs. Optional was the 5.8 litre V8. This put out 162 kilowatts at 4,500 revs, or 429 newton meters at 2,200 revs. Aside from the forward disc brakes, which were now standard, as I mentioned earlier, the cars continued with Ford's variable ratio power steering. The ZH Fairlane also featured twin quartz halogen headlamps. A factory sunroof remained an option, although funnily enough, you see a lot more ZG Fairlanes with the sunroof than you do ZH. There was cut pile carpeting throughout, including the luggage area, front and rear inertia seat belts, power ventilation, intermittent windscreen wipers, heated rear window demister, a column-mounted store control for turn indicators, lane change, headlight high-low beam and flasher, as well as the horn. Bumper overriders front and rear were also standard. Ford also released a special edition, which was the Sportsman Pack. I actually had a Desert Gold Sportsman. It was my second car. It was about 5 years old when I bought it. Really nice car in Desert Gold. So Ford released 750 special edition Sportsmans. That was based on the Fairlane 500. And it offered a saving on the options of around $403. The additional extras included a padded colour-keyed vinyl roof, chrome left and right-hand remote control rear view mirrors, side view mirrors, chrome exhaust trim, Volante sports road wheels, pinstriping and ornamentation on the bonnet and C-pillar. It was available with vinyl trim, which had perforations in the seats, or cloth insert seating was available on some of them. And they were available in a number of colours. The Desert Gold, as I mentioned, Port Wine, which was a nice burgundy, Sweet Cream, and Snow White. The car, as I mentioned, was a saving of around $403. The retail price was $11,257. That came standard with the 4.9 litre engine and the T-bar automatic transmission. Around the time I had my ZH Fairlane Sportsman, my older brother Paul had the early series Fairlane 500 with a 5.8. And you can see the comparison here. We parked the cars next to each other many years ago. They've both long since been sold, but you can see the difference in the front treatment with the early series car with the silver grille, the FORD, and the Fairlane badge in the grille with the wreath under it, versus my Series 2, wasn't called Series 2, but the later update Fairlane with the Sportsman, which had the black and chrome grille, had the Ford Roundel logo, and eliminated the Ford lettering on the above the grille. And at the back, this is an easy way to tell the difference between an early series and a late series. You can see that the early series Fairlane had the silver between the tail lights, and the late series one had the blackout treatment, which I think looked a lot better. And then also on the left-hand side, you can again see Ford spelt out as letters versus a roundel using the Ford logo. So the Marquis was the top-of-the-range model in the Fairlane series. It had the twin comfort lounge seats, and each of those had their own separate armrests. The later series also had power seats as well. Had a very nice velour interior. There were also the upmarket chrome side view mirrors, similar to the Ford LTD. The hubcaps I mentioned before. It was really a very, very nice looking car, very nice package. And Ford was really pitching that against the Caprice, even though it was a little bit cheaper than the Caprice, because they thought that its LTD was, a much bigger car than the Caprice. So they're trying to sort of position the LTD above the Caprice. And certainly in sales, the LTD handily outsold the Caprice. The cashmere cloth was what was on the Fairlane as standard. The later series Marquis moved to the leather interior. They also featured the T-bar automatic with the center console. The early series Marquis had the, as I said, twin comfort lounge seats with the column shift. As I mentioned before, Ford had seen an erosion of its market share from over 50% in 1972 in the luxury car segment, and the ZH models did certainly turn that around. So, for example, in 1977, there were 7,355 Fairlane sold, compared to 4,562 Statesmans. The ZH Fairlane certainly cut a fine figure, a lot of differentiation compared to the standard Falcon. And this is something that really did play into Ford's hands by design compared to Holden, who, I guess if you look at the Statesman, for example, and you look at then a Holden Premier, you'll see that there's quite a derivative design, particularly in the front end of the car. And I think that certainly hurt Holden's sales. And it wasn't until the WB in later years where Holden really started to differentiate the car to the appropriate level. The ZH was able to recapture market share, as I mentioned earlier. So, if you're a real estate agent or you're, more senior executive, the Fairlane was a car that was, the obvious luxury choice in Australia at that time. The cars maintained their comfortable ride, good power, good handling, certainly better handling than an equivalent American vehicle of the time. If you look at, say, an American LTD, for example, the NVH, the noise, vibration, harshness of an LTD would be better, the ride would be better. But generally speaking, unless you optioned a big block, and even then probably not the case, the Australian Fairlane would outperform, out-accelerate, out-handle, and certainly out-brake its American equivalent vehicle. As much as I love my American cars, but I think it's fair to say, and so these cars were quite rugged. They were ideally suited, for comfortable around-town cruising, but also for trips out into the country where the roads were often less than satisfactory, but also towing, boats and horse floats, caravans, things like that. The ZH Fairlane was certainly up to the task. I mentioned before the automatic transmissions. So the C4 gearbox was fitted to the 4.9 litre and the FMX was fitted to the 5.8. Dimensions were overall length 5,181 millimetres or 204 inches, width 1,955 millimetres or 77 inches, wheelbase 2,946 millimetres or 116 inches. Overall height was 1,366 millimetres or 53.8 inches. The standard fuel tank capacity was 79.6 litres or 17.5 gallons, and there was an optional fuel tank, a larger fuel tank, which was 125.1 litres or 27.5 gallons. The hubcaps used on the marquee with the red centre, I think they look really terrific. In fact, I do own today I don't have my Sportsman anymore, I sold that a long time ago, but I do have a beautiful ZH Fairlane in chocolate brown, which is one of the update series models with about 100,000 Ks on it. I do have the original hubcaps, but I fitted the marquee hubcaps because I just think they look really terrific. And as I said, I love the ZH Fairlane. It's my favourite Fairlane of all the models. In fact, my top three are the ZH, the ZC 351 and the AU. From a side profile view, the new ZH Fairlane also featured the rear doors that had been updated in the XC Falcon, which had less of a Coke bottle look. And this lower cutout in the doors provided a more open and airy interior or cockpit for the passengers. There's no doubt that the ZH Fairlane, the changes that were made to that model to increase differentiation, put Ford back on track in terms of its market leadership in the luxury car segment. And this went on for many, many years past the ZH Fairlane model. A total of 22,982 ZH Fairlanes were built. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode on the ZH Fairlane and the Marquis, my favourite Fairlane of all time. Please make sure, if you haven't already, check out the full Fairlane Auto History series on the channel. Just check out the playlists. You'll also see a series on the Ford Falcon. the Holden Commodore, and the Chrysler Valiant as well. Plus, we'll be doing more series as we go forward. So make sure you give the episode a thumbs up. It does make a huge difference to the channel. And hit that subscribe button as well. And interested to see what you think of the ZH Fairlane. And if you leave a comment, I'll be sure to respond to you. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Now, there's a new Ford Fairlane 500. The styling is new and distinctive. But this year's Fairlane offers you something more than style alone. A 4.9-litre V8 gives you the big car performance you expect from a car of Fairlane's breeding. And to add to your safety, there are new refinements. Twin quartz halogen headlights, 3-speed intermittent action wipers, power disc brakes on all 4 wheels with a larger capacity booster for reduced braking effort, and a suspension matched to large profile steel belted radials. New engineering refinements giving you more, much more than style alone. Take the wheel for traditional Fairlane luxury and comfort. The interior is color coordinated. The dash layout is new. Electric clock and push button radio with power aerial as standard. New Fairlane 500, engineered with style.